My name is Srini Rao. I'm the host of the Unmistakable Creative podcast.
Oh, that's right. You do a podcast too, don't you? I'm, of course, bringing you in, and I appreciate you coming on to talk about excessive digital consumption, and that's you've written about that, and that's where I discovered you is through the written word.
Yeah.
But you also do podcasting. Talk about the whole multimedia stuff that you do.
Well, I produce a podcast, as you noted. I write, so I've interviewed something like 700 people over the last 10 years. They range from bank robbers to drug dealers to performance psychologists to authors to entrepreneurs. They're all just people that I find really interesting and I'm curious about. I'm also a public speaker. So I think that, to kind of get us to, talking about what you kind of found me for is excessive consumption. Naturally, as a media creator, you spend a lot of time consuming content. Like, you also spend a lot of time looking at what other people are doing. And what I just started to see was that we live in this world where we are inundated with inputs, from social media to email to text messages to websites. We've never been drowning in so much information. And it's really hard to hear the sound of your own sort of creative voice and your own thoughts if you are constantly inundated with other people's inputs. It's just not a natural way for us to operate. Like, we were never meant to function like this.
One of the ways that we market this program, the Multimedia Cafe, is one of the programs I do, and part of our tagline is we give you content in so many different forms, and we do interviews in multiple medias, that sort of thing. And we often joke about how we thank people for tuning in and checking out our content because you can get it in so many places. The other day I was at the gas station and Steve Harvey was giving me news at the gas pump. I mean, you can't even go get gas without getting inundated by content. And so it's interesting that this topic has kind of resurfaced in a new way, I guess, because this excessive digital consumption, I've never seen it really from the creativity angle like that. I've seen it a broad brush, but the way that you kind of dissected a little bit was unique in its own form. Talk to me about what drove you to finally write this article, because it was a little bit introspective from your part.
Well, I think it was my own sort of personal experience, and it's kind of a fitting question given the timing of it. I just took 30 days off of social media, in January I quit, and I'd been really stuck on a proposal that I've been working on for a book, and, after 30 days away, the ideas just started to flow like they had before, and it was just, a ton more writing. I've been publishing a blog post every day. So I saw that, wait a minute, we aren't giving ourselves time to think. If you want to do creative work, you have to have solitude. You have to have time for self-reflection. You have to have time to express those thoughts. And that requires being disconnected from the world. It requires not being inundated constantly with information, because if you basically have your attention constantly shifting from one stimulus to another, which is pretty much the sort of default way that most people live in the world today, it's virtually impossible for you to ever get to the point of being deeply focused on one thing enough to the point where it will lead to a creative breakthrough. Because what we know from all of the sort of neuroscience research is that one of the triggers of what they call a flow state is uninterrupted focus on one thing, and yet that is in such short supply in the world today, and excessive consumption plays a big role in that. Like, if people reduce the amount of things they were consuming, they would find it much easier to reach that sort of heightened sense of creativity, heightened sense of awareness, this what they call flow state. And so I think that even just being off of social media for 30 days, and I've been pretty mindful about the way that I use social media for the better part of the last 2 years, or at least I thought so. I use distraction blocking tools. I was spending probably no more than a minute or two a day on Facebook. Like, I drastically reduced my use of it. But when I logged back in after 30 days, I think what struck me was how compulsive this behavior really is, even for somebody who is as disciplined as I am. Like, wait a minute, you are not making these choices consciously, whether you think you are, whether you believe it or not. These are choices that are being made for you by the people who make these products, because what they've done is they've designed these things to be incredibly addictive. They have people who are literally called attention engineers. People say, the mission of Facebook is to make the world more open and connected. It's like, yeah, but their business model is to sell your attention to advertisers. Those two things are kind of in conflict with each other. So I think once you have this experience firsthand for yourself, which I recommend to everybody, you begin to question the value of things like social media in your life. You also begin to question the value of consumption in general. And say, okay, well, is this really adding anything to my life? I mean, I think my default rule at this point in my life is, okay, treat the information that you consume like the food that you would eat. And if most people, ate food the way they consume content, they would all be overweight and probably have diabetes and not be in the hospital because they just, basically consume so much crap online. One of my friends at social media is like basically the donuts of digital content. And that's a rather unfortunate way to live. I mean, it's just not healthy. I think it causes us to disconnect from not only the world within us, which is something that somebody told me, but I think we get disconnected with the people that are right there in our lives in order to, quote unquote, connect with strangers on the internet, like people that we've never met, who we assume we have a relationship with, when in all reality, we couldn't call 98% of them to bail us out of jail at 2 a.m.
Yeah, I agree.
Our friends, they are friends according to Facebook, but they aren't really your friends. And so I think that, one of the other things that has come from this, and, we're going on a few different tangents here, but I think the most awful thing that has come from social media is that we've created this culture of artificial celebrity, right? Where people can be famous for being famous, and being famous is suddenly accessible to people like you and I, as opposed to, oh, you don't need to be Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie to become famous. So we now have this sort of, really screwed up value system in which fame is a high priority, particularly for a lot of young people who've grown up on this stuff. And the danger of that is that you start measuring your self-esteem and vanity metrics, and that's like just a rabbit hole of absolute shit to lead to mental health issues, and all the research is showing this, right? We know for the last several years that you're seeing increases in anxiety, increases in depression, particularly among a group of younger people. And, when they look at the research, they say, what's changed in the last 10 or 15 years? And there's only one thing, and it's, social media and smartphones. We were never meant to consume like this. This is not healthy for the brain. So, it's not just, something that gets in the way of your creativity. It gets in the way of numerous other parts of your life. One
of the more interesting parts of your article on excessive digital consumption and how that stifles creativity and bleeds into many parts of your life. And I agree, by the way. I went off social media for 2 years. I went off when I was going through a kind of a custody, personal type of a thing. I went off social media. And in fact, after the year was done, I stayed off it for another year because I enjoyed just not having it. And so I went back on primarily for my business as a form of distribution, just like a newspaper boy, that type of thing.
Sure.
And back in 2007, when my son was a year old, I got rid of our TV. So I haven't had a TV in our household for over 10 years. Now, we stream things online, but what I found was just not having the TV on, not having Fox News on, CNN, whatever in the background, that eliminated commercials, and that eliminated a lot of the fear that a lot of content brings today, a lot of speculative fear in today's world. When it comes to news and information and that sort of thing. That's a whole different side tangent. We won't get into that, but I wanted just to give you those examples of my life so that, for one, to let you know my background, but two, also the listening audience to kind of validate what you were talking about is when you do go off social media, it is amazing how much introspective looking within yourself can be done so easily, because trying to just go to a coffee shop and see how many people actually have a conversation and how many people just sit together and play on their phones. It's amazing, that type of thing. But going back to your article very quickly, digital fatigue, this was a very interesting part of your story, your article, that I found to be a lot more accurate than I think people realize, that throughout the day, I'm going to very quickly give an overview and then you kind of get into some detail, but throughout the day, online, you make so many decisions that at the end of the day, you're done making decisions. Even like, what am I going to have for dinner and that sort of thing. Talk to me about that, because I think a lot of people are affected by that and they don't have any idea.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right? So the premise of that whole concept was based on, like, hold on just a second. Sorry about that. I mean, if you're thinking about it this way, right? You wrote about Baumeister wrote a book called Willpower, and willpower basically is all determined based on how many decisions that you've made throughout the day. So let's assume, for the sake of simplicity, that you basically have a balance of willpower, like you have a bank balance. And for every decision you make, that balance gets depleted, kind of for the same way that every purchase that you make, your bank balance goes down, right? Now, what happens with particularly online is that people don't view those things as decisions, but every link you click on, every email you respond to, every article you read, every Facebook post that you click like on, all of those things are decisions. They seem really inconsequential because they're like, really, are you kidding me? None of these are, all that important, and they're not. But the reality is that they actually deplete your willpower because they're decisions, so that, when you get to an important decision, you have a really hard time. I notice it in my own life, nowadays, you get on Netflix at night to stream something, you're kind of like, what the hell am I supposed to watch? There's so many options here. And then part of me wonders if the reason we feel that when we land on Netflix is because of the fact that we've had this, endless sort of consumption.
I know we used to joke about how, we were going to watch a movie Friday night, but then after 45 minutes of trying to find something on Netflix, we got tired and went to bed. Because there's just so much to choose from, and you don't want to make a bad choice because your time is so limited and yada yada type stuff. So,
and I can't help but wonder if part of the reason for that is because we've already made so many decisions throughout the day.
Oh, I agree. Well, I appreciate the time today. Talk to me about what you got coming down the pipe and how people can make you some money.
I'm a professional speaker. I'm actually in Colorado at the moment for a keynote speaking engagement, which is at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So just grabbing lunch. But Unmistakable Creative is the podcast that's